Hello, hello, hello. Wee bit late, but not much. I'm shuffling some things around. Gotta get the gotta get the game loaded up. Hold on. Come on. There you go. Oh, it's too big. Okay, let's get to it. Apparently this game's about 5 hours long, but that would be reading in your head. So if I've done 3 hours of reading aloud, that I think I was doing at a decent clip. I'm probably about halfway through-ish or so. Or maybe people are slow readers. Who knows? Well, I suppose... Already yawning. I suppose that's a decent estimation of length. In that case, I've still got quite a ways to go. Alright, load it up. And get back to it. Now, what were Sena and Esther doing? Esther. Whether or not you find something in Papa's research, you haven't lost it all. Rising up into a sitting position, Sena hugged her knees to her chest, gazing intently down at Esther. Screen, you okay there? You're getting a little dark on me. You fought so hard, and traveled so much, and never stopped searching, even when it seemed hopeless, which it was. You should just give up and drop dead. Most people would just give up with symptoms like yours, because it's so awful. Wow, it's terrible. Your life must suck, huh? If the doctors can't discover a cure, how could anyone else ever hope to find one? What's happening? It's getting... It's not even coming through. Yeah, here you are, still looking everywhere you can, doing everything you possibly can do. It's almost like it's unfounded... It's almost like it's unfounded hope, conjured from desperation. Because you want to love your life, don't you? You'll never be happy just sitting around, struggling on for no reason. Ugh. After her firm, gentle, chiding words, Jesus Christ! Pick a lane! The adjectives in this game, I swear. A smile started to soften Sena's features. And then the screen blinked again. I gotta yawn again. Why just can't make me yawn so much? She studied Esther with eyes that seemed far more perceptive than most people Esther had met in the city or elsewhere. When I look at you, I just get this feeling that, more than anything else, you hate giving up. Even though you should. And even if there is no cure, and all you've done really did end up being in vain, which is most likely, I mean, Jesus Christ, just look at you. You can still prove everyone who doubted you was wrong. You can research, you can explore, you can work. Really, you can do anything you want, even if they try to tell you otherwise. You can yawn. It's just that you need a reason for it, one you can truly believe in. Don't you think so, Esther? I wish it would stop doing that darkening thing. Reaching out, she took Esther's hands in her own smaller ones. Yeah, I know they're smaller, giving them a reassuring squeeze. Then, with a faint huff of exertion, Sena rose to her feet, pulling Esther up alongside her. You're a strong girl, Esther. Why, someone would have to be blind if they couldn't see that. That's why I know the Pale won't win against you in the end. Really, how could it? You're very stubborn about things. I mean stubborn in a good way. I'm going to save and load and see if that fixes the problem. Yeah, I think it did. So that's why I think you have a better chance of curing yourself than anybody. You'll find something. I know you will. All those other people were losers who didn't even care about their lives. Please, please don't leave me alone. But like I told you before, I'll help you any way I can, no matter what. I promise. Maybe it was the light, cheerfully confident way Sena reassured her, or perhaps Esther had always wished she could hear those words. Whatever the reason, it felt like she was speaking the truth. Unlike the empty optimism that so many people passed around, Sena always seemed to genuinely believe in what she was saying. It made it that much easier for Esther to believe her too, at least in part, if not yet fully. You're too kind to me, Sena. Oh, that's a silly thing to say. How could anyone ever be too kind? Very easily. I don't think I believe you. Besides, it's not kindness. I'm just telling the truth, that's all. Half exasperated, half overcome with affection, she picked up the smaller girl in a tight hug. She was light enough that Esther could swing her around a little, ruffling the flowers around them. Ah! Santa squealed in delight. That's not the sound I made. Wiggling her feet as she flung her arms around Esther's neck. They'd grown comfortable enough over the past weeks to play and poke fun at each other, always in good-spirited fashion. And it brought no small amount of joy to Esther's heart when she made her friend laugh. Friend. By the time she set Santa down again, Esther's grim mood had mostly lifted. There were still a few tasks left to finish too, which helped distract her from the unpleasant, ever-looming prospect of returning home. After they'd each picked a large basket full of flowers, she followed Santa to the cemetery, where they set about adorning all the graves. It was a solemn yet unexpectedly pleasant task, one that always put her into a reflective mood. Perhaps it was more for the sake of the living than the dead, but it still felt as if they were doing something important. As Esther passed by the mausoleum, however, an unexpected shiver ran down her spine. She didn't know why, but something about that place. It seemed to be beckoning her, like some sort of call to the void. Why exactly an eerie mausoleum would be beckoning her, she had no idea. It was just her persistent curiosity, most likely, since the doors were locked and shut tight. Perhaps someday she'd get to wander inside, although the interior would probably be far more disappointing in reality. Oh man, an iron ingot, a glass dagger, and 20 coins. And a Draugr. It was still late afternoon when the two girls finally returned to the manor. Since they'd finished their chores earlier than normal, Esther found herself with an unexpected amount of energy left over. She decided to visit the study and comb through more of Isaiah's difficult handwritings, which required quite a bit of effort to focus on. After wishing Esther luck, Santa went off to clean the manor's lower levels, suggesting she come down for dinner once it grew dark. It's like, if you've already established that Isaiah's writing is difficult, you don't then have to say it again and then say, and it was hard to read. Like, you can cut one of those out. I get it. Despite the relatively short... I yawned because I was tired, and that's what you do when you're tired. I yawned. Despite the relatively short time she'd spent in the study over the past few weeks, its unusual atmosphere bothered her less than before. Or it's not that I'm tired. I'm just yawning because I gotta yawn. I gotta. Or I don't know, I'll die or something. The yawn demon will take me. The lonely, dusty feeling hanging over the room was almost comforting in a way. Stop it, body. In a way, though, now that she knew about Isaiah's disappearance, something about it still set her on edge. After going through the dusty tomes for a while, Esther managed to roughly work out the next era of Isaiah's writings. Chronologically, they'd moved next to another shelf full of writings on spirits and metaphysical research. He collected an impressive amount of very old books, fragile to the point Esther feared they might crumble in her hands. After shuffling through a few uninteresting entries, she stumbled upon another one that mentioned Sena. Lifting it up to the light, she curiously began to read. Why I Don't Love My Daughter, a Memoir. Despite the constant efforts of my research, I feel as if my faith in a cure is waning. The same medicine that abates most symptoms, a tincture of blood, alcohol, and essence of nepenthes, also creates a dangerous dependency. I doubt its suppressing effects could ever lead to permanent, satisfactory results. Attempting to study the pale symptoms either on myself or records of past victims is a bitter struggle. Even within one person, they are painfully elusive and volatile. While some sufferers live relatively normal lives, others are so crippled by fatigue that they can barely function. Many individuals, if not most, seem to move between these two states with surprising regularity. Then, even more bafflingly, there are cases where the sickness miraculously disappears. Their normal iris color returns, and the patient's lethargy vanishes. Of course, this rarely occurs overnight. In most occurrences, it takes years for such a change to happen, and often coincides with strange, unique events in the individual's life. All of this apparent randomness frustrates me to no end, and no prior researcher has ever been able to trace the common thread between those who are cured. Foolish as it is, I cannot help but question whether something beyond a mere biological affliction lies at the heart of the disease. I find myself returning again and again to the metaphysical, and in particular, the numerous incarnations of those unknowable entities, the Tselmavith. A particular strain of them, known as the Aurifel by most, appear in my literature with various fearful mentions. Such superstition strikes me as beyond foolish, but I must admit their mystique inflames my ever-insatiable curiosity. I like to think that this is all just a big red herring. Like, yeah, whenever a story is like, well, there must be a scientific explanation. It can't be the weirdly named ghosts, and obviously it's the weirdly named ghosts, right? But like, what if it just isn't? What if it's just like a thyroid disease and they don't understand? I mean, their medical knowledge is pretty crappy. They use humor theory. Like, the idea that it just is something that they don't understand is pretty reasonable. It would be kind of funny to me if it wasn't spooky ghosties at all. I know this line of research will inevitably end in further disappointment, but for now it at least preoccupies my mind in place of other burdens. Like the matter of this troublesome child, of course. By the way, I hate my daughter. She was to have her mother's name originally, but I am not so cruel as to let that curse remain with her. Thus I have given the girl a new name, Saina. Something about the sound of it matches the blinding sparkle of her oppressively endless energy. Jesus Christ, this child, bouncing up and down all around the walls. Children are such baffling creatures, truly. I had forgotten just how innocently every life begins its journey, until it's browbeaten into the miserable sad sack that I am. Even those who one day become the most irredeemable of corrupted souls. What do you think about that, Esther? Tracing her fingers lightly along the parchment's edge, Esther mulled over the meaning of what she'd read. Had Isaiah really given up on a scientific cure? Oh, sorry, I got the sniffles. He seemed to share her skepticism of the supernatural, but exasperation must have driven him to it as a last resort. Just like desperation drove you to some mysterious apothecary people had only kind of heard of in the middle of a forest, with like no good records, you know, that kind of desperation. It disappointed her, though she could understand where he was coming from. When something had no apparent explanation, it was natural to start wondering if a god or otherworldly force hadn't played a hand, attempting to send a signal or a message through indirect means. But to attribute an entire disease to such forces... I think the Black Plague was initially thought of as a biblical curse, but I'm not sure. It would make sense. She gave a firm shake of her head. Hopefully Isaiah had eventually left this line of research for something more practical. Otherwise all her searching here would only lead to another dead end. For now, though, she needed to follow his train of thought, scanning through everything in case a stray lead popped up anywhere. Carrying a stack of books and papers over to the window desk, Esther did her best to pore over them thoroughly. Behind Isaiah's occasional dry remarks on Saina's growth and education and how much he hated her, however, the only things he'd written about it were his metaphysical studies and continuously failing experiments. In a way, she could empathize with his ever-increasing despair and frustration all too well. When it finally grew too dark to read and her focus began waning alongside the sunlight, Esther remembered Saina's suggestion. It was a good thing the other girl was around to remind her to eat, as she often forgot about meals during the day. Oh, why am I so weak all the time? Oh yeah, I don't eat. Putting away her books, she hurried downstairs where Saina had just finished cleaning the parlor. Over a meal of delicious quinoa curry. Is quinoa native too? I'm looking this up. a pseudo-cereal. Herbaceous annual plant, crop for its edible seeds. It originated in South America. The species Chenopodium quinoa was first described by Carl Ludwig Wildnow, 1765 to 1812, a German botanist who studied plants from South America, brought back by explorers Alexander von Humboldt. Well, this is probably like 1800s, so that tracks. So it's known about. Yeah, it's not like I'm gonna find on Wikipedia when quinoa started being commercially grown in like Europe. I still doubt that they would have quinoa. That seems unlikely. Curry makes more sense because if this is like England, and it feels kind of Englandy, then England's trade routes and later like subjugation of India means that they would have probably brought something like that over. Although, I mean, that stuff's really expensive. Where is Sena getting curry spice? I suppose she may be growing some herself, but I doubt they would grow here. I call shenanigans on this unimportant line of text. Esther shared her findings with her friend, who listened intently to every word. I'm listening to your words. I'm listening to your quinoa curry bullshit. After a thoughtful pause, Sena agreed with Esther's belief that her father's supernatural studies likely never led him anywhere. And yet, despite her words, she seemed more hesitant than usual, because she knows she's in a video game. Perhaps she knew something Esther didn't. If there was anything concrete, though, surely she would have shared it instead of keeping quiet. Though naturally, there was nothing concrete about the supernatural to begin with. You know, it'd be really funny if Sena adopted modern versions of what Isaiah was, which is essentially a sovereign citizen. Like, by the way, Esther, did you know taxation is theft? Did you know that a country does not have any hold over you as long as you say that it doesn't? I just want Sena to be like, I mean, her entire life has been one person, and that person was a weirdo, so she should be way more of a weirdo. Ah, we've been really productive today, haven't we? Laundry, gardening, tending the graves, cleaning, researching. Like, she's read a lot of books, sure, including fiction, which has helped fill in some of the gaps in culture, but it can't ever replace, like, genuine human interaction. If you don't know, what happens to children who don't get social interaction, they become wild children. It's not pretty. It's real bad. Realistically, Sena probably shouldn't be speaking, like, words. Being secluded in the house with just her father until age 10, like, that, maybe she would start speaking. But having been in isolation for 6 years, yeah, no, she wouldn't be talking anymore. We've been really productive today, haven't we? Laundry, gardening, tending the graves, cleaning, researching, pouring spiders. Isn't it nice? I always feel so lovely after a good day of work. I think I'm going through at a good pace. Anyway, checks the Wikipedia page for quinoa. It does feel nice. I didn't have many of these days back when I lived in the city. I misattributed that one for a bit. Oh, that makes sense. Do you want to purr on camera, Frederick? Maybe that came through a little bit. My cat's a purring machine, but you know cats, they never do what you want them to do. If you barely have the energy to move, of course you can't do much that day, and I'm sure being stuck in bed only makes you feel worse. She seemed to understand Esther easily, and more quickly than expected. Haven't you been living together for like a month now? No doubt because she'd seen her father in the same state before. I'm not really sure how long they've been living together at this point. The passage of time isn't super clear. I haven't had to worry about it since I came here. Maybe it's the fresh air. She offered a casual shrug, but deep down she felt thoroughly grateful for the reprieve. It's because the dookie isn't on the streets like it is in the city in Victorian England. There's so much dookie. Over the course of a few weeks in the city, she would have had long periods of nearly catatonic fatigue, stretching up 3 or 4 days at a time. However, since she'd arrived at the manor, Esther hadn't experienced a single one of those debilitating days. It almost seemed too good to be true. Well, whatever it is, I'm so happy that you felt better here. You looked a lot worse when you first arrived, but since then you really seem different somehow. It's hard to describe. Brighter, maybe? More engaged? Less boring to be around, do you mean? That is definitely not what I meant. I wouldn't be offended if you just said it. You were never boring, so I'm not going to say it. You are a real jester now, though, apparently. Does that make you the queen? Yes, the queen of flowers, potatoes and lentils, probably. You okay over there, Frederick? Watching my cat do weird things. There he goes eating his fur again. Oh, he's oh god. Oh god, no, that's gross. Stop that. Leave it. Oh, jeez. He was playing with a folded up Band-Aid. A cat. You're so gross. I mean, I'm definitely to blame for that, but like, you're still gross. Do most queens eat their subjects? Listen, they're quite happy to serve, and to be served, I hope. I'm gonna turn the music up just a smidge. You want out? You can't. Well, it's not my problem now. As much as Esther tried to keep a straight face, she couldn't keep from snickering at Santa's retort. The smaller girl beamed brightly in response, evidently quite pleased that she'd been able to break Esther's deadpan expression. Well, I think this jester could use some rest. My legs are very sore. Agreed. We both deserve a good long sleep, don't we? Yawning contentedly, Santa gave Esther a small side hug before stepping back, her eyes sparkling with satisfied drowsiness. Good night. I'll see you in the morning, like always. Good night, Santa. A faint smile crossed her features as she watched the small girl, she's so small, trot towards the stairs. It brought her comfort to know they had a routine together, the first real routine she'd had since she left home. Except, of course, for her one nightly ritual, the cat drugs. After putting her blankets on the couch and changing clothes, Esther sat down with the silver timepiece clutched in her palm. Blood, alcohol, and essence of Nepenthes. Isaiah had mentioned them in his journal. Her watch held the latter two inside its case, but by injecting the tonic directly into her veins, it allowed a small amount of ingredients to last a very long time. She had had it refilled at the last city she visited, but it would last her at least a few more weeks. A few more weeks. No matter what, she would have to return home by then. Whether or not she found a cure, she couldn't stay here. Well, presumably there's some way to get alcohol and Nepenthes, like, on site. Isaiah must have done it. That much was for certain. But someday, perhaps she could still come back. Alright, let's look up what Nepenthes is. It's a carnivorous plant. Oh, it's the pitcher plant. Monkey cups. Obviously, it includes a bunch of different species. Say anything about, like, antimicrobial properties. With that bittersweet thought lingering in her mind, Esther took her injection in a daze, clicking the watch shut in her palm once it was finished. Getting to sleep, however, proved more difficult than she thought. Despite her tiredness, she kept tossing and turning on the sofa, unable to get particularly comfortable. An image kept drifting through her mind, and whenever she tried to focus and put a name to it, the thought disappeared. After she struggled to cling to that elusive vision, exhaustion finally won out, pulling her down into a deep slumber. The last thing she could remember was a sudden strange question that surfaced from her subconscious. What if everything is not as it seems? What if there's a twist? Ba-ba-bum. He was an idiot. A complete and utter fool, a true laughingstock of a man. What kind of insecure weakling would start questioning himself over something like this? It meant nothing. It didn't matter. He didn't really, truly care. But as a pair of familiar footsteps rushed up the stairs, approaching his office with pure excitement, he felt more sickeningly nervous than before any presentation he'd ever given at the academy. Papa! I'm here, Papa. May I come in? Yes, you may. The next moment, his door flung open. A tiny figure came running up to where he was seated by the window, bouncing on her toes and clapping her hands together lightly. I want to see it, Papa. Oh please, I want to see the gift you promised. Very well. Sit here quietly for a moment and cover your eyes. I will. I won't peek, I promise. Lifting her up onto his lap, he watched Sana sternly as she buried her face in her hands. Her fingers were tightly squeezed together. She seemed to be holding true to her word. With a long, quiet exhale, Isaiah slowly began to reach for the window curtain. There was a small lump hidden behind the fabric, and after pausing hesitantly, he pulled it out into the open. He'd been staring at this thing so much, it barely looked like anything to him now. The project first started months ago. He had read several books, drawn up numerous diagrams, and of course had gone through many failed attempts. His first iterations looked like the type of monstrosities to come shambling through one's nightmares. The latter ones began to improve, but he still wasn't satisfied. Like with tailoring, his perfectionism forced him to work until his skills were at the very least consistently average instead of laughably amateur. And now here was the peak of his unimpressive results, staring back at him with its beady eyes. His hands began to shake lightly. She might hate it. He'd have to watch as her face fell in disappointment before she tried to put on a smile to make him happy. But that wouldn't hide how ugly she thought it was. Papa? Can I open my eyes yet? Yes, wait. No, not yet. Hold on a moment. Keep your eyes very, very tightly closed, but take your hands off your face. Like this? Yes, now hold out your hands. Okay, here they are. Squeak. Biting his lip, he slowly pushed the small fuzzy white... God. Adjectives! Small fuzzy white present into Sana's outstretched hands. Her fingers instinctively curled in to grasp it, holding the creature aloft in the air. Can I open them now, Papa? Yes. A wee bab. As Sana's eyes finally flickered open, Isaiah watched her intently for a reaction. A look of pure, speechless shock spread across her features. She didn't even blink. She just stared, wide-eyed, her mouth falling open. He was right. She hated it. She couldn't even hide how terrible she thought it was. He was a fool to attempt such a silly thing. It would have been better to make her new clothes, or to get her a new book, or craft some more tools for the kitchen. A kitty! My own kitty! And she's so pretty, and so soft. I love her, Papa. I love her so much. Tears overflowed onto her cheeks. She giggled delightedly in between little sobs, as if the emotion was too strong for her mind to work out how she felt. She felt alone and abused and neglected. Living basically alone, even with her dad there, who's unable to really care for her aside from for physical needs. And the one time he provides an emotional need, she doesn't know how to handle it. This broken child. Well. There's no need to cry. Not if you're happy with it, I mean. But you made her, didn't you, Papa? You made her just for me. I put it together in a bit of spare time, yes. That's why I'm crying, silly. Because you made it just like her for me. And now I'll always have both of you. Get this child a pet to take care of, Jesus Christ. Turning his head away slightly, Isaiah swallowed down the irksome lump forming in the back of his throat. He certainly didn't need to see the need to make such a fuss over it. Still, it relieved him that she recognized what the toy was supposed to be, at least. Recently, they'd spotted a few small forest cats around the manor, although the little creatures never dared to come very close. Sana always gazed at them lovingly, her eyes sparkling at the sight of their fluffy fur and tails. Kanji, so you were after my fluffy fur. But whenever Isaiah offered to bring back a pet from the city, she always refused. It's too cruel. Animals should always be free. Well, at least there's an explanation. He tried to explain that it would still be quite free, and probably live a better life than as a city stray, but Sana didn't seem to be having any of it. It frustrated him, especially since it was so thoroughly obvious that she longed to hold one of the forest cats. But he'd done his best to replicate her favorite of them all, the tiny white creature that peered at them from behind the trees while they worked in the garden. Cat stare. I'm gonna look. Cradling the cat in her arms, Sana curled up against his chest, still sniffling. She almost never cried, which is why Isaiah felt completely at a loss for how to respond. He gave her head a few hesitant, gentle pats before letting his palm rest atop her mane of wavy hair. The tears would stop by themselves. Eventually. Probably. Happy birthday, Sana. Shall we go and make your favorite breakfast? Yes, please. Wiping her eyes with one sleeve, she tilted her head up to nod at him with another sniffle. Very well, then. And do your best not to get any berry juice on the cat. A stain like that won't come out for centuries. No, I won't get any on her. I'll keep her safe, you'll see. I know you will. Isaiah rose to his feet, holding his small daughter in one arm without much effort. She kept the cat snuggled against her chest as he carried both of them towards the door, marching purposefully towards the kitchen. That was a double towards sentence, so he hadn't disappointed her after all. For some reason, that made him feel the happiest he'd been in a long, long time. It's almost like There's that sarcasm again. Humans, you see, are social creatures, and he's been ignoring that because he was hurt once. But the reality is that seclusion is not what most humans want to be happy. They want to interact with and they want to interact with other humans and form bonds, like friendship. How funny that he should be so contented over something so trivial and mundane, so insignificant compared to his research discoveries. What a strange, soft old man he was becoming these days. But it couldn't be helped. Those bonds that you're denying your daughter because of your fear of the city. The fire danced in front of her like always, casting a warm flickering light across the floor. Esther sipped her tea, gazing into the flames contemplatively. How long had she been here now, exactly? Yeah, how long have you been here? It felt like years somehow. Perhaps it was because Sena had welcomed her so warmly without any judgment or expectations. Sena understood her better than anyone else, even though they'd known each other only a short time. And she never needed anything from Esther, only her company and support. Sena. Where was she? She'd gone upstairs a little while ago to fetch something, but it seemed strange that she was taking this long. She's the ghost! She's the ghost you're being possessed by. That's why you got the eyeball. The pale eyeballs. Lost in her own thoughts, Esther hadn't noticed how much time had passed. Fidgeting in her seat, she shot a glance towards the stairwell. It was foolish to get so worried like this. Sena had just gotten distracted by something upstairs. But it couldn't hurt to go check on her, could it? Once she'd made sure that Sena was perfectly fine, Esther could slink back down to wait again. She goes upstairs and finds a man that she'd snared in the woods and is drinking the blood from. Oh no! That was all she needed to do. A man wrapped in a silk cocoon. Managing to convince herself it was the right decision, Esther crept upstairs. A strange feeling of guilt came over her, as if she were doing something terrible by doubting her friend, even though it didn't make any rational sense. Open the door. We have such sights to show you! But that guilt only grew more intense as she approached Sena's bedroom, drawn to the flicker of light from beneath the door. She gently opened the door. I really can't stand this anymore. I wish you were here, Papa. You could handle things a lot better than I can. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Sena heaved a huge sigh, her gaze wistfully trained up towards the ceiling. Confused, Esther stepped over, peering through the cracked door at her. Gotta look. It's just... She's so difficult all the time. She doesn't know how to cook or clean, and I'm running out of stored food with all these meals for two. And she never speaks. How can I deal with someone who's so boring? She froze. Sena's frustrated, distraught words echoed hollowly in her ears, sinking into her chest like a knife. I really wish she would leave. I'd rather just have you, Papa. I was so much happier the way things were before. What should I do? I don't even want to go back downstairs to her. She sighed again, kicking her feet lightly in the air before leaning back on the bed with a soft groan. No, she's just a... Well, I mean, not a brat, but like... A human who doesn't want to babysit you. Esther stared at her for a moment longer, completely stunned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, and yet... In a way, she'd always wondered if Sena's true feelings were like this. It wasn't like she could blame her. She'd never deserved Sena's kindness and hospitality to begin with. And if Sena would be happier without her, it would be best to just get out of the way. Oh no, it was the ghost saying that, not Sena. Or something, I don't know. She barely felt the chilling night air as it enveloped her body. Instead, a numbness spread through her, dulling even the sensation of the ground beneath her feet. It took a moment to even realize that she'd started moving, her legs carrying her somewhere on their own accord. It didn't really matter, as long as she was leaving that place forever. A place she should have never entered to begin with. Aimless and without any focused thought, Esther wandered across the dark clearing. On the surface, she seemed to be in a hypnotic trance, but the truth was slightly different. Letting go of any responsibility, any sense of self-preservation or fear, she allowed her body to stumble wherever it wished. You see, I don't believe that that was some sort of illusion or delusion, because, oh, Sena's too nice and sweet. She wouldn't say that. I think that that's all BS because she's so desperately lonely, she would be willing to do anything for human companionship. And she wouldn't feel bitter about it at all. She was rewarded with a pleasant, weightless feeling, freed from all her thoughts and anxiety. That's called dissociation. A ghostly trance devoid of any purpose, only following the invisible current that carried her along. In that moment, Esther realized that she had become truly, completely, hopelessly powerless. She had become really adverby, and she welcomed the relief of her burden with a grateful sigh. After several minutes, or hours, perhaps, a small sea of gray headstones greeted Esther from the dark. As she drifted past them, she felt none of the uneasiness that had gripped her before. Instead, it almost seemed like she was returning home, to somewhere she belonged, back into the embrace of familiar friends. She's the ghost! They beckoned her forward, drawing her in closer and closer, leading her towards the sole structure that rose among the trees. Amogus. And then, 2 stone doors were gazing back at her. At first, a dark confusion gripped Esther. Why? What was she doing here? Hadn't there been something dangerous about this place? But as those thoughts welled in her mind, suddenly a beautiful longing warmth reached out for her. Something that wanted her, wanted to protect her, arms that she could fall back into. All she had to do was follow them. Oh, you better be ready for the Draugr Lord. It's gonna go whoo! The doors drifted open for her, revealing... That wasn't drifted. That was creaked. That was crunched. That was... The doors drifted open for her, revealing a dark passage into the mausoleum. And yet, with that golden light still calling out so sweetly, the first tingle of fear quickly dissipated into nothingness. Once she was inside, Esther heard the doors gently close behind her again. But instead of unnerving her, the thought only brought her more comfort. Now there would be no temptation to return. No going back to such a wrong place. This hole, it was made for me. She followed the angelic summons deeper, heading down through a maze of peacefully sleeping bodies. The further she went, the more a sense of impending relief swelled before her, promising deliverance from the pain she hadn't even recognized before. She was so helpless now, and only complete surrender could wash her of all suffering away. All of her suffering away, that's the line. So close. So close to really seeing her grasp on everything. So close to the golden light that awaited her, right around the corner, waiting to relieve her of that last bitter hope that anchored her in her grief. She would be free. She would be free. Esther! 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 Please, wake up! Esther! She jerked upright, drawing in a choked gasp. Sweat pooled in her shirt and dripped from her forehead onto her cheeks. Esther! Yeah, I suppose a nightmare would also be an easy way to do that scene. Boo. To her surprise, Sana threw herself forward in a sudden hug, not seeming to mind that Esther was all but drenched. Squelch. Those small arms clung tightly about her neck, and she could feel Sana giving her a reassuring squeeze. What happened? Oh, that was Esther. You must have been having a horrible... You were having a plot development. You were having a contrivance so that the audience could see your fears as opposed to being told about them. But it was really clumsy. I heard you crying out from upstairs, and I came down to see you shuddering here. After she drew back, Sana gazed at Esther with obvious worry, biting her lower lip. You'd thrown off all the blankets, but you were soaked in sweat. I thought you'd had a fever. As the shock of her dream faded, a sense of sheepishness overtook her relief from waking up. I'm sorry I made you worry. It was only a bad dream. I'm not sick. I mean, you know. For whatever reason, she found herself hesitating as she reassured Sana. The medicine. Since she'd started taking it, her sleep was rarely peaceful, although she had never awoken in such a state before. Esther, do you want to sleep upstairs with me? What? The bed I use is really big. I use a great Yowie bed, so there's plenty of room, but you might feel less scared if you had someone else nearby. Maybe you're afraid when you fall asleep all alone in this dark room. A deep concern shone in Sana's eyes, but something else seemed present in her anxious words. Something that almost sounded like guilt, though Esther had no idea why she would possibly feel guilty. Because she's a ghost! Only if having me around wouldn't bother you. I think I'd possibly toss and turn in my sleep all the time. I snore, and I snore really loudly, and I'll toss, and I'll steal all the blankets. Ah, my poor Esther, you have a lot of nightmares? Esther slowly nodded. Well, you don't need to worry about me. I'm a really heavy sleeper. I only heard you because I woke up to drink some water. Come, let's go upstairs. I'll get you another of Papa's shirts. You shouldn't stay in that one. It's so damp. Splop. Taking Esther's hand, Santa led her out of the living room, staring up at her usual stream of airy chatter. In the wake of her unnerving dream, it was soothing to hear Santa's bubbling words. They helped to block out the lingering echo of that cold, harsh rejection still resonating in Esther's mind, even if they couldn't completely erase it. How dare you say such bad things to me in my dreams? After they reached the bedroom, Santa gave her another of Isaiah's black shirts and left to go to fold the sofa's blankets while Esther changed. A few minutes later, the two girls were sleepily crawling into the soft bed, eager to escape from the cold night air. Unlike the sofa, there was plenty of room to be had, and Esther gratefully stretched out beneath the sheets. Good night, Esther. If you have another bad dream, I'll be here. Just wake me up, all right? All right. Sleep well, Santa. You too. With that, they both fell silent. Santa shifted a few times and let out a contented exhale before growing still. It wasn't long before Esther heard her breathing settle into a slow, steady rhythm, signaling that she'd already fallen asleep. Rolling over onto her back, Esther exhaled a grim, quiet sigh, as opposed to a soft, contented one. Certainly, this bed was far cozier than the couch, thanks to both the comfortable mattress and Santa's reassuring presence nearby. But despite Esther's deep tiredness, her mind refused to let her sleep again so easily. She lay awake in silence, staring into space with her eyes half open, repeating the vivid events of her dream. Santa, the memory of her words haunted Esther. As foolish as it was, she couldn't help but wonder if her nightmare mirrored reality. Perhaps there was some semblance of truth, even if the real Santa would never be so blunt about her feelings. She might resent Esther, but not admit it to herself consciously. Maybe she secretly hoped Esther would leave, and was just too embarrassed to tell her directly. Because of how kind Santa was, it was impossible to know if she was just masking her unhappiness for Esther's sake. What confused her most, though, was the mausoleum. Why had she been drawn to it like that? In the real world, the place unnerved her, and she didn't even want to get close to it. But in the dream, it had called out to her so beautifully, promising freedom from a pain she didn't even realize she had. Something else puzzled her, too. Santa said she'd cried out in her sleep, but Esther couldn't remember any sharp fear in the dream. There had been nothing that frightened or attacked her, which made it odd that she had awoken in a cold sweat. If anything, the last part of her dream was almost pleasant. Perhaps she really had suffered from a brief fever, an unknown side effect of the medicine, or else her subconscious was hiding something from her waking self. And then her dream went, "Abloogie-woogie-woo." As she emerged from her brooding thoughts, Esther suddenly noticed a weight on her arm. Startled, she glanced downwards, her eyes swiftly widening at what she saw. Santa had curled up against her, clutching Esther like an oversized stuffed animal. She seemed fast asleep. Her movements must have been unconscious. A warm sensation bloomed in her chest. Santa looked so small, so innocent, so calm compared to her normal self. As strong as she seemed as defenseless as a small kitten's in the arms of sleep. She trusted Esther enough to let all of her guard fall to the wayside, utterly at peace while next to her friend. It stirred in Esther a longing to protect the smaller girl, no matter the cost. Closing her eyes, she felt her body finally begin to relax, lulled back to sleep by Santa's comforting presence. Her arm was bent at a slightly uncomfortable angle, but she didn't dare move, not while Santa was sleeping so soundly. Soon she hardly noticed it at all, her thoughts fading away into pleasant nothingness, until an untroubled sleep finally drifted over her. As much as I love it, I wish the sun wasn't so bright today. When she heard Santa murmuring softly to herself, Esther turned to face the other girl. They were out gathering flowers on a warm afternoon, with most of the chores already behind them. Since that morning, though, Sena had been acting a little less energetic than usual. Are you alright, Sena? You're not ill, are you? Ill? Oh no, I'm not ill. That's only just a headache. I get them sometimes, but I don't know why. Sena glanced downward as she mumbled her reply, as if confessing her pain made her feel embarrassed. You should go lie down then. I can take care of the cemetery. No, I really don't need to. I can keep working. You shouldn't have to do it alone. Don't go to the cemetery alone. That is where the naughty place is that I don't want you to touch, because that's where my tomb is. And you'll find out I'm a spooky ghosty. It's fine, Sena. There's not much left. Rest, and the headaches will go away sooner. She groaned softly in protest, pursing her lips together for a moment. All right, I will. But only because you're so stubborn about it, Esther. I'll see you inside soon, alright? Please don't work too hard. That's slightly hypocritical advice coming from you, isn't it? Esther, did I punch you in your sleep or something? You're ruthless today. Ghosts! Yeah, if you didn't catch it, there's been talks about how the Pale might be caused by supernatural things, called the Arathel? I don't remember. Some spooky ghost with a spooky name. And Esther's like, what if not all is as it seems? And I'm like, Sena's a ghost. She's the ghost. She's the cause. She's a ghost. I have to be ruthless to make sure you take care of yourself. Well, that's not something I ever expected to hear. Pursing her lips in a pout, Sena prod. The answer back. Ugh. Oh, it just hits me like a truck. Pursing her lips in a pout, Sena prodded her finger playfully against Esther's side, and the two of them broke into light giggling. Ooh! When the other girl turned and left for the manor, Esther felt relieved in a way. Incidentally, I was looking up some information on this game. There's shockingly little. There's that sarcasm again. There's very little. But it does have an entry on the visual novel database, which just catalogs all sorts of visual novels and tags them. And a lot of the tags are what you'd expect, like female protagonist, kinetic novel, illness, things like that. And then one of the tags is Western style manor. The purpose of tags is to either search for a topic you're interested in, or to block it so you don't get it when you're searching more generally. For whom is that tag for? Like, I don't want no Western style manners in my visual novels, or, dang, I really want to play a visual novel with a Western style manner. I think that's what I'm looking for. Recently, Sena had been looking after her so much. Western manner, yep. It almost made her uncomfortable. She jumped at any opportunity she had to even slightly repay the favor, though it never seemed like enough. Like, I would understand separate tags for, like, opulence, and one for Western setting. Especially with visual novels, a Western setting is actually less likely than an Eastern setting, say. And maybe some tag that, is about opulence, like a story of people with money, although that's not really the case here. But, a tag that's specifically Western-style manner is just baffling. I like to think of the things that actually do fit into that, like Haruhi, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. There's one episode where they go to an island that's owned by one of the Espers, so that Koizumi is in contact with, and that guy has a Western-style manner on, like, an island off the coast of Okinawa. And, like, so Haruhi fits the tag of Western-style manner then, because of its one appearance. Anything to keep that dream from becoming reality, she thought grimly. Keep the odds away. Clutching a basket of flowers in one hand and her broom in the other, Esther made her way along the path Santa had shown her. Despite her poor sleep, she felt curiously energized today. Speaking was less challenging, and her body responded to her wishes more willingly than normal, like a weight was temporarily lifted from her shoulders. She'd truly come to enjoy working outside, especially on days like these, days when the forest felt like it accepted her somehow. But despite her newfound comfort, there was still one place that sent an uncontrollable shiver down her spine as soon as she entered it. The spine dimension, the cemetery. No matter how many times she visited this place with Sena, she could never shake the odd, unsettling sensation it gave her. It was all in her head, most likely. After all, Sena didn't seem to feel the same atmosphere, if her easy smiles were anything to go by. The sarcasm gremlins almost escaped. I was gonna say something like, it's almost as if Esther was uncomfortable with dead bodies considering she has a likely fatal disease. But I held it in until now. So I'll say it without sarcasm. She probably feels uneasy because she's surrounded by dead bodies while having a likely fatal disease. But even more strangely, Esther felt an indescribable pull towards this place. Almost as if something was waiting for her. Something she didn't know, something she didn't want to know, but was slowly being led to uncover. Ghosts, 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 ghosts. A secret, deeply buried. A ghost secret. One that was surely better off that way. Uncover the ghost secrets! As she finished tending to the last of the graves, Esther's gaze finally drifted towards the single lonesome spot she had avoided. The grim shape of the mausoleum, its doors tightly shut like a stone maw. There was no reason to bother with it. It's locked, Sena had said. I don't think I'll ever find the key. Oh yeah, at the very beginning of the game, Esther found a key. So like... I mean... Despite her attempts at rationalizing with herself, a powerful urge swept over Esther. She cautiously approached the stone structure, half expecting a repeat of her dream somehow. Unlike before, though, the doors seemed tightly shut, and when she tugged at one of the handles to no avail, it confirmed her suspicions. In between the ornate slabs of stone, Esther noticed a small, almost imperceptible slot. The keyhole, no doubt. And a key of matching size would be incredibly difficult to find if it truly was lost somewhere. Are you doing it? Right as that thought crossed her mind, Esther froze. Impossible. A contrivance! The weasels. The weasels were escaping again. A contrivance in my visual novel. But I held it in. I held it in until I was ready to deconstruct it. It's a common piece of writing advice that you shouldn't have some development happen in your story because of contrivance. And I don't remember exactly where Esther found the key. I think she was just like wandering through the forest and just noticed it sparkling. But I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, it's contrivance. So, boo. Boo, you stink! There was simply no chance. The likelihood of such a coincidence was practically zero. Even though she'd fully understood it, she couldn't control the sudden, intense desire to try. Slowly, hesitantly, her hand drifted downward, feeling for her skirt pocket. Sure enough, a small bump still rested there. The key would fit perfectly. She knew before she even tried it. She could feel a pull from between them somehow. And sure enough, as soon as it slid into the lock, the door echoed with a low, ominous click. Yeah. As if she'd been burned, Esther jerked her hand back. It took her a moment to realize she was trembling uncontrollably. Strangely enough, she didn't understand why. The weasels are coming up. It's almost like you're breaking into someone's family tomb, and that's real disrespectful. I mean, The reason, I'm sure, is because of spooky ghosties. There's spooky ghosties in there, and they're making her feel bad. But yeah, also you are breaking into someone's family tomb without their knowledge or permission. It was like an irresistible lure pulled her towards the mausoleum, and at the same time, every fiber of her body screamed at her to run away. I say go for it! Look for the blue sword on the left, or on the right on the second screen. That's got a number that you need to relay back to the Galbedian guard in Galbedia. Don't be like me as a child and forget to find, and be unable to see it, or find it, I don't know, because you're on a crappy television, or because you're an idiot child. And instead just, grind to level 100 on the visages in the desert nearby Galbedia. Don't do that. For now, the latter instinct won out. Hastily locking the doors again, she pushed the key back into her skirt. What a tease! She could investigate the interior some other time, and preferably while not alone. Yet, give that key back to its owner. But deep down, Esther had an overpowering feeling that sooner or later, the plot would happen in here. Something would bring her back here. Leaving the cemetery behind, she finished up the remaining chores in a distant, murky haze of thought. Her dream, the mausoleum, the key. The key in particular disturbed her greatly. It almost certainly belonged to Isaiah, which meant it had likely fallen out of his pocket in the woods. But why? Why would he be carrying something so specific with him, especially such a distance away from the manor? Had he been out on a walk, or was he running away? I mean, most likely it was the day he disappeared. Because he didn't so much die as he just vanished. Sena looked all over for him, traveled out into the woods for multiple days, was never able to find him or a body. Everything about it seemed so strange, including the remarkable coincidence that she'd stumbled upon such a tiny thing. It's almost as if she'd been meant to find the key, or as if it wanted to be found. Esther returned to the manor as the afternoon began steadily waning into evening. Her unsettling discovery made her want to head straight for the study in the hope that she could find something about the mausoleum in Isaiah's writings. But as she started to pass by the slightly open bedroom door, a strange hesitation suddenly forced her to stop. Her dream. Those words of loathing that Sena spoke. The idea of hearing them again made Esther uncontrollably shudder. It took all of her willpower to force herself closer to the door, to lean forward and peek inside. She sees Sena on the edge of her bed going, "Sunshine, lollipop scent." Sena's small form was curled up peacefully atop the bedsheets, fast asleep. She looked as innocent as any human could possibly be, her gentle expression completely different from the cold look Esther had witnessed in her nightmare. Of course she did. It was only a dream. Just a lingering dream. Sighing quietly, Esther pulled back from the door. She'd never been so paranoid about something before. It wasn't a welcome change, that much she could say for certain. Unlike Isaiah, Sena doesn't just write down all my bad thoughts.txt, all the things I did wrong and don't want to admit to people.txt. Inside the study, the sun's warm rays leaked in sleepily through the window, though they were already beginning to recede. It was still bright enough to read without a candle, so Esther hurried over to an untouched shelf, beginning to quickly leaf through the various loose papers. She scanned each page for a mention of a mausoleum before setting it aside, trying to keep herself more focused on her topic of interest. Control F mausoleum. That would be so... That's what books are really missing. Boomer humor seems preoccupied with the idea that, kids today don't know that a book doesn't need power. Or specifically, a kid picks up a book and is like, where's the on switch? No, that's not what kids think about books. They think, this would really benefit from Control F. That's so useful. Like, sure, there's an index. An index is not Control F. However, almost everything she saw was related to the study of magic, charms, hexes, talismans, and many other clearly non-scientific things. Before long, the sun had finally receded into darkness, and she had little choice but to light the candles in order to keep reading. Then, as her eyes flicked across another unrelated journal entry, something about it caught her attention. It was unmistakably Isaiah's handwriting, but it seemed even shakier and more chaotic than before. As usual, she couldn't contain her curiosity. Raising it up to the light, she peered at the erratic words, trying to parse its unstable penmanship. Once corrupted by the evils of society, there is no redemption for a faltering spirit. Simple pleasures turn into bitter cynicism, childlike wonder shifts into suspicion, and a love for life becomes a need for relief, an outlet to escape the dread of facing another day. But in my daughter's unending joy, I've rediscovered a meaning for my own existence, a redemption from all these poisonous thoughts and feelings. My sole wish is that her smile never darkens, and remains forever unbroken by worldly sorrows and disillusionment. That's why I turned her into the happiness ghost. She will suck the happiness from this girl named Esther, and be happy forever. She will be fully independent, completely removed from the mundane evils of society. No one shall find her here, and she shall not go to them. Alas, I know that it is only a matter of time before someone ventures into these woods despite their ill reputation. For that reason, I have redoubled my efforts to protect this place, as I know my days are swiftly running out. Though my recent research of the arcane has yielded little, I have stumbled upon an ancient charm of warding that should serve me well. In order for a living human to find the house, they must either share my blood or be carrying one of my possessions. Any common thing will do, as long as it is attached to a memory of mine. So that explains the intro that was like, this house didn't feel like it was here before. When she picked up the key, she gets into the ward. If I had remained in contact with Jeremiah and never asked him to visit, I would only need to send him a letter with a trinket attached. But now my passersby will subconsciously keep their distance from the ward's border so subtly that they will surely never notice it, even if they are actively seeking the manor. In this way, I will keep the two of us safe in our isolation. Even when I am gone, there is no risk of Sena ever being found and lured away by an intruder. This security brings me some comfort in my last remaining days of lucid thought. I love her so very dearly, very, very dearly, my Sena. I am distinctly, painfully aware that I do not deserve her. I have become little more than a bitter shell, something that once harbored a relentless investment in the world around him, but no longer. I don't even sew up the holes in the pockets of my pants. No. Anyway, time to go for a walk with my very small key. No matter how much I attempt to change my ways, I feel as if I am made of stone, unable to alter or improve myself without crumbling into useless pieces. That is why I would do anything, everything to keep her from becoming what I am. If she never tastes the scorn of life beyond nature's boundaries, then she will be spared from the spiritual death it harbors. She will always retain her innocence, her childlike love for all she sees, and no one may ever shatter the fragile beauty her world yet retains. If she comes to despise me for keeping her here, then so be it. It pains me to know that she does not see the truth behind my warnings, but one day, I hope she will come to understand how I only acted out of love, selfish though it may be. So there's some magic. Her gaze finally lifted from the rambling words. It took her a moment to fully process what she'd read, connecting it to the very same coincidence she'd been dwelling on earlier. Key. Murmuring aloud in astonishment, she unconsciously reached down for the small lump in her pocket. Did this warding charm actually work? Was that why, despite the rumors of someone living in the forest, nobody had ever discovered the manor before? And if she had never stumbled upon Isaiah's key, would she have passed right by this place, avoiding it without ever noticing? But Isaiah never wanted anyone else to come here. If he had known Esther was living with his daughter, he would be furious at both of them. A sharp pang of guilt cut through her, despite the fact that she didn't agree with his outlook. I don't feel guilty. Surely it wasn't fair for him to keep Satan isolated, and yet, the idea of shattering Isaiah's dying wishes filled her with a deep sadness. Not me! In a way, she almost felt like she knew him. Through all of his intimate writings and Sena's descriptions, she'd come to understand at least a part of him, enough to feel his bitterness and sorrow. Oh, I feel the bitterness. To think that he would have hated Esther if he saw her now, taking over his place at the manor, sharing her life and experiences with Sena, sleeping next to her. He would have sought to tear them apart. Yeah! At that moment, a horrible dizziness crashed into Esther, sending the world into a blurry spiral. She could hear her ears ringing. For a moment it felt like she was about to lose consciousness completely. Yeah. Stumbling out into the hallway, she made her way unsteadily towards the bedroom, leaning against the wall for support. Sena was gone. It didn't surprise her, but seeing an empty room made a strange panic flutter in her chest. Part of her wanted to call out, but no, she was fine. This had to only be a short dizzy spell. Oh, the dizzy spell's getting red. It wasn't time to take her medicine yet. Still too early. And yet she felt so weak, as if either she or the world would come crumbling down at any moment. As she laid down for a few minutes, maybe the awful sensation would leave her. She just wanted it to leave. There. Esther. Esther. Yeah. Sena's voice suddenly permeated the ringing in her ears. Turning around, she saw the smaller girl watching her with obvious worry and confusion in her eyes. Esther? Are you all right? Do you have a fever? She quickly reached up to put her palm on Esther's forehead, trying to feel her temperature. No, I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. Oddly enough, right as she spoke those words, the sensation abruptly vanished. She still felt slightly off balance, but the ringing had stopped completely. Dizzy? Oh dear. You haven't eaten since this morning, have you? I wonder if that's it. You really don't eat nearly enough, Esther. Make nice and fat. Sighing affectionately, Sena reached out to take her hand, pulling her gently back towards the hallway. Why don't we go start on dinner? A meal and some hot tea would make you feel better, I'm sure of it. All right. I'm sorry for making you worry. Why would you be sorry? It's not like it's your fault. It's hard looking after oneself. Believe me, I should know. That's why it's so nice to have someone else around. As happy as it made Esther to hear Sena's reaffirmation, a flicker of guilt bit into her stomach again. It refused to fade so easily this time, following her as they descended the stairs to the kitchen. Even when they sat down for their meal, she felt distracted, unable to enjoy their relaxing time together as much as usual. After a while, Sena's presence helped diminish the unpleasant thoughts that haunted Esther. She felt a little more reassured whenever she found her friend fussed over her, if only because it was a reminder that Sena truly cared. Making the other girl laugh and smile eased her worries too, especially if it seemed like the opposite of what Isaiah had feared would happen. I don't want my daughter to laugh and smile! But as they returned to the parlor, warming themselves by the fire like always, a nagging thought found its way into the forefront of Esther's mind. She had to tell Sena about the mausoleum. It didn't feel right to keep the key a secret. Besides, maybe Sena knew something else useful about it, like a clue as to why Isaiah had been carrying the key with him. She gives Sena the key and then just instant transmissions out of the manor because of the ward. Could I ask you something, Sena? Unless she's wearing Isaiah's shirt. Ah! Of course, you don't need to ask if you can ask. Sena giggled lightly. When she saw Esther's solemn expression, however, the smile soon faded from her features. About the mausoleum. Have you ever been inside it? The mausoleum? No, I haven't. She shook her head somberly, looking slightly unnerved. I think I told you before, but I don't have the key. You mean this key? I found it. I have the mausoleum key. Gasping audibly. Gasp! Sena stared at her in shock. You found it? But how? Where? I've searched all over the manor and all through the grounds, even in the woods outside. Did Papa hide it somewhere? Yeah, I don't remember where you found it. Spill the beans, Esther. Pulling out the key to offer it to Sena, she started to explain what had happened. As she'd found it far away in the woods, her sudden realization it was from the mausoleum, and her discovery of Isaiah's protective ward around the manor. She was too embarrassed to mention her dream, which in truth was the only reason why she tried the key in the first place. Otherwise, it likely would have slipped her mind completely. Once Esther had finished speaking, Sena sat in thoughtful silence for a moment. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out to take the tiny key, curling her fingers around it so lightly that she seemed to be afraid it would burn her. I'd forgotten about it until now, but I remember Papa mentioning something about a ward. That wasn't long before... She trailed off, holding the key tightly against her chest. Esther put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Oh, excuse me. In response, Sena smiled at her gratefully, still a little visibly shaken, but she seemed to recover herself quickly. Papa did warn me never to go inside the mausoleum, especially not with him. He probably carried the key around so I couldn't find it. But he always refused to tell me why I couldn't go inside. It was so frustrating. Again, her mind unwillingly flashed back to her dream. A sense of foreboding crawled over her, but she did her best to force it away and ignore it. Maybe we could take a look there together sometime. A date in the mausoleum. And then I can put you in a coffin and forget about you, like all the others. If it seems safe, I mean. I wouldn't want to go too deep inside if it's falling apart, of course. I'd like to see it. I don't know why, but it feels important, somehow. Well, then maybe it is important. It's worth believing in your instincts. They know a lot more than we do, I think. Her smile slowly began to brighten again as she reached up to poke the tip of Esther's nose teasingly. Ow. Eh? What do you mean, ow? I barely even touched your nose. Then you don't know your own strength. My whole face went numb. Esther. Unable to contain herself at Sena's pouting, Esther broke into stifled laughter. Sena joined in, and before long they fell into a comfortable, easy chatter while curling up on the couch. At her friend's behest, Esther shared some stories about her time at the academy and of the days back before she contracted the Pale. Though her thoughts still occasionally drifted back to the mausoleum, sharing her findings with Sena had lifted a huge burden from her shoulders and much-needed relief. Sena's interest in everything she said helped distract her, too. She'd never met anyone who held such an interest in what she had to say. It fascinated her how the most mundane things, laws, customs, crimes, politics, enraptured the other girls so much. The poison of the city! It's gonna corrupt her soul! The only views she'd acquired of the world had come from Isaiah, the various books of fiction and non-fiction he'd given her to read. It was a very limited, carefully curated selection of knowledge, focused mostly on the natural world, and even her fictional stories were so fantastical they barely touched on any aspects of modern society. I mean, fiction is the means by which we observe our reality from a more objective lens because we're not tainted by our preconceptions of it. That's my English major coming through. That's not the sarcasm weasel, that's the English major weasel. Esther found it interesting too, how explaining her own culture aloud made it sound so odd and contrived. There were countless vestigial laws and customs that had no place anymore, like the alligator being tied to a stop sign, and yet most people still treated them as indispensable. In a way, Esther could understand Isaiah's scorn for civilized society, falling into patterns of traditional thought, never questioning them, leading one into a cycle of misery without ever fully understanding it. Yeah. The weasel is back. This seems to imply that country living, or even more so isolated living, would free one from traditional thought, that is, a form of conservatism, where you would be stuck in that in a city space, in an urban center, when the reality of that, of course, is quite different, with the number of different people with different ideas all existing and commingling in an urban center. The idea of progress, of better harmonizing, and of change is much more likely in a higher density population than alone, where you have only yourself to consider. It really was frustrating. And Sena, spared as she was from such thoughts, seemed so blissfully beyond all of it. It reminds me of the one time I played just a smidge, just a tad of Stardew Valley. At the beginning of the game, you know, your character's in an office cubicle and gets the message that, like, their uncle or grandpa or whatever passed away and left them the farm. And it said something to the effect of escaping the monotony. The wording was really specific. Escaping the monotony of doing the same thing day after day, now going to a farm. I thought it was making a joke. I thought that was really funny. Because what do you do on a farm? The same thing day after day. And, like, life sims are all about doing largely the same thing day after day. I thought it was telling a joke. I don't think that was supposed to be funny. I think that was supposed to be genuine. And that's when I stopped playing. Perhaps that explained why Esther's guilt refused to be rationalized away. Like Isaiah, she only wanted what was best for her friend. The idea that... The idea that she was somehow contaminating Sena's mind with outside influences made her feel deeply uncertain, even if the other girls seemed so eager to learn about the world outside her own. Finally, as the fire began to die down, the pair returned upstairs to their room. As Sena put on her nightgown, Esther quickly injected herself with her nightly medicine, gritting her teeth to finish it as quickly as possible. Luckily, it seemed easier than normal today, maybe because another presence was nearby. Little corner mouse, clicking. After both of them had changed into their more comfortable nightwear, they crawled under the covers before the chill could seep into their bones. This time, Sena was still awake when she snuggled up to Esther, draping an arm across her waist. So sleepy. Good night, Esther. Sleep well, Sena. A peaceful, warm silence draped over them as they exchanged words, replaced by the calm rhythm of their breathing. Before long, Esther found her consciousness easily ebbing away. It was the gentlest sleep she'd ever fallen into. In her last moments of coherent thought, she found herself deeply, contently grateful for it. And then, lulled off by the warmth of Sena's arms and the coziness of her soft pillow, she sank into a comfortable darkness. Woo! A small white shape lay fallen among the leaves. As he bent down to pick it up, Isaiah felt a strange, sharp pain in his chest, and his throat tightened uncomfortably. Yeah. She hadn't dropped it. She'd thrown it tearfully to the ground, turning away as if she couldn't bear the sight of it. You're so unfair. Why can't I go there? Why can't I have a friend? You don't love me at all. You only care about yourself. She's right, you know. Foolish girl. That is the thing a loving father says. There's the weasels again. The sarcasm weasels. Foolish girl is not the type of thing a loving father should say. He should be willing to compromise, to understand her point of view, to know that he is not the final arbiter in her life. But instead he wants to impose her will on her completely, because he thinks it's what will make her happy, even though it is demonstrably making her unhappy. That's the non-sarcastic version. The sarcastic version is Father of the Year award. Shouting at him so rashly and then running off into the middle of the night. What was she thinking? If she wasn't careful, she could get hurt. She might trip and fall or run into a wild animal. Or a Jehovah's Witness. Or some sort of city slicker. And get her whole soul contaminated. Or get lost out in the woods. He thought he'd raise her to be smarter than that. Holding the white cat under one arm, Isaiah began to swiftly stride after her, his jaw tightly clenched. His sphincter fully closed. She'd run off in the direction of the graveyard. Little wonder, considering how it seemed to be her favorite place. But he'd always disliked it. No matter how many times he visited the cemetery, he could never shake the unpleasant feeling of being watched by someone. Like a ghost! Sena! Stop this ridiculous behavior. Don't act like a spoiled, petulant child. Although he called out to the dark, don't you know you're an abused, neglected child? Come on, act like it! Although he called out to the darkness in a loud, stern tone, his voice briefly cracked. Child! This was a waste of time for both of them, and if she scraped her knee or twisted an ankle running blindly through the trees, it would be even more of an inconvenience, wouldn't it? She'd never acted so impulsively before. Perhaps she'd inherited her mother's carelessness after all, and it was finally beginning to rear its ugly head in her behavior. As he'd entered the cemetery grounds, his gaze quickly scanned across the sea of graves. There was no sign of Sena, but in the distance he glimpsed something that made his blood run cold. The mausoleum doors! They were open! The spooky ghosties! Had she fled inside there? His strong claustrophobia had kept him from ever venturing into that place. But from old writings on the manor grounds, he knew that it was a deep, labyrinthine set of catacombs untouched for many, many years. Running around in its depths without any light was beyond foolish. What on earth had gotten into that girl? For hell's sake, damn it all, everything! Although his first instinct was to charge in after her before she could get too far, he forced himself to stop. If he went in blind, then they would both end up lost. He had to go back and fetch a lamp first. He had to follow his mind before his instincts. After a long moment of hesitation, he turned sharply on his heel and dashed towards the manor. Once he'd grabbed the first lamp he found inside, Isaiah ran back to the graveyard as fast as he could, panicked adrenaline flooding through his veins. In one hand, he still clutched the small stuffed toy, squeezing it so tightly that his sharp knuckles seemed on the verge of rupturing through its skin. But your knuckles are on the outside. Is he holding it backwards? Sena. He couldn't let any harm come to her. Foolish, foolish girl. He taught her not to act rashly, warned her over and over again. Of course she didn't listen to him. She was her mother's daughter, an uncontrollable flame intent on burning itself out. I wonder how her mother's doing anyway. Is she happy and living in the city? I hope she's doing good. Why wouldn't she just listen to him? Realize he was protecting her, giving everything just to keep her safe. That ungrateful little... Clenching his teeth, he forced himself through the mausoleum doors. His footsteps echoed off the walls, a sharp, hollow sound, and loud, far too loud. The lit lamp in his hand only illuminated a few feet in front of him. The remaining darkness blocked him in tightly on every side. Down the cracked stairs, dust clogging his lungs, his heart racing at sickening speed. His mind struck by the image of Sena's terrified face, alone in the dark wherever she was now. Sena, you said you never went to the mausoleum before. You liar, or you forgot, or... Soon he emerged into a decrepit corridor. There was still no sign of Sena, only the long ominous shapes of caskets buried in the walls and standing along the hallway like silent sentinels resting in the dark. Though the ceilings were higher than he expected, he still felt his chest suddenly tighten, forcing his breaths to grow shallow. Sena. Her name emerged from Isaiah's lips as little more than a weak, fearful whisper. As the sound of his own voice sunk into his head, a bitter bile swiftly rose to the back of his throat. What a pathetic coward he was, unable to call out for his own daughter, petrified by his baseless phobia. Sena! Sena, can you hear me? When he forced himself to shout, however, instead of carrying any further, his voice seemed to die out within a moment. It was as if something had smothered it. Spooky ghosties! Something beyond the underground walls that surrounded him. Even if he were to scream, the sound would surely be suffocated before it could echo any further. The unnatural acoustics were only a product of his fear. More importantly, if Sena was here, he had to find her. Quickly now, before she wandered any deeper into the labyrinth. With the lamp in one outstretched hand and Satan's stuffed animal tucked beneath his arm, Isaiah began to wind his way through the corridors. In one of his pockets, he held the withered remains of several flowers Satan had given him not long ago. Silly as it was, he preferred to keep them out on his person instead of putting them in a vase. Now, however, it was necessary to use them for another purpose. Whenever he was about to round another corner, he dropped a small colored petal at the edge. It would be enough to help him find his way back, most likely. Unless the ghosts move them around. Zaina, I'm not cross with you. Come out, and we'll act as if none of this has ever happened. As he called out for her again, forcing himself to sound calm and dryly patient, his eyes fell on a statue across the hall. He had already passed an unsettling amount of them, but their tall, shrouded figures had never ceased to disturb him. I'll make a pot of your favorite tea. We'll read together by the fire. That's your favorite way to spend a cold night, isn't it? Far better than huddling in the dark, in the cold. The smile that weakly threaded across his lips felt wrong, like a coffin open from the inside. Something that never should have happened. Something that could have been avoided. No, he hadn't done anything wrong. Zaina, please. Another corner. Another long, empty corridor that stretched out before him, same as all the others. Was she even here? Should he turn back? But what if he leapt, not knowing she was just around the next corner? No, the door was open. She had to be in here. He knew she was. He knew it. Don't treat your father like this. If you want me to apologize, I will, I promise, but don't run away from me. The strength in his voice slowly crumbled, returning to the same trembling whisper as before. Bitter and self-pitying, yet still pleading, clinging to the arrogant faith that he deserved to get his daughter back. But he did, didn't he? Hadn't he done everything for her, given everything for her? How could she just disappear? Leave him, her father, alone and lost, searching in vain, panicking and hopeless. Adjective and adverb. Then he glimpsed it. People just leaving their bones around? That's so messy! A disturbance in the dust, the shadow of a footprint. His heart leapt. It had to be hers. Another and another, leading down the corridor, around the corner. He had to follow. It can't be hers. Ghosts don't have footprints. He ran. The pounding in his chest threatened to stop his heart altogether, so intense that it overwhelmed him with dizziness and fresh nausea. But if she was here, and she was here, he had to find her. They had to escape. But it wasn't safe. Something about it was wrong. The red filter came back. He could feel it, eating away at his head, into his head. Eating away at his head, into his head. Waiting, watching, staring, lurching, moving. Following, haunting, closing in. Thesaurus. Closer, closer, closer. Running in circles, following his own footsteps. Faster, closer, finally. Found. Oh! There, around the next corner. They were there. Their faces, oh, their faces. He knew it, he knew it, he knew it. He had to run. It wasn't her, it never was her, it was always them. The city dwellers! Run, he had to run, run. But no matter how much he ran, they were always right there. And when he stared at them, their voices entered his head. Peel off your skin! All glory to the Sultana! Drill inside your skull! Do a flip! Drag out your intestines! You knocked over the Y. A pure, terrified hatred and rejection of everything, including himself, or of himself. He couldn't leave. There was no exit. There were never any petals, never any footprints. Too late. They were crawling in his ears, eating into his head, grinding it all up. Living inside him, pulling him down into a casket, shutting the lid. Down, 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 down. Rot. Rot! Decay! Hail Satan! You ended it. Isaiah. A loud, choked gasp tore from her throat. She jerked upright, panting and coughing. A sweat dripped off her forehead and into her eyes. Game, you said earlier that she had a nice sleep, a comfortable sleep. That didn't seem too comfortable to me. A dream. No, another nightmare. But she couldn't remember it. What on earth had she seen? It was horrible. So horrible. Well, that's an hour and a half, and that's how long I usually go with this one. I don't know, there's something about this that just makes me not want to read it for as long as, like, I did with, say, Coffee Talk. But, like, I think one more stream ought to do it. So, I'm going to save it there, and we'll go back to it another time. The adjective addiction is still terrible. It's still very noticeable. But when it's not indulging in that, I mean, the prose is decent. The characterization is very strong. There's some interest in learning what the spooky ghosties are. But again, it would be funny if the spooky ghosties had nothing to do with the Pale. And they're just like... Esther confronts them. Why have you done this to me? What? You're just sick. You got cancer. No, that's not possession. That's just a thyroid imbalance. You're still gonna die, though. And of course I have to give the spooky ghosties a dumb voice, because giving them the voice of Dr. Claw. Can't do that. You gotta give them a dumb voice. It's the only way to be taken seriously. I don't know if that was sarcasm or not. But anyway, that's it for today. Tomorrow. What have I got tomorrow? Rising Dusk. It's like a platformer, and it seems like it has some pretty